At exactly 11 p.m., Vanessa Caldwell looked up from her phone, met her husband's eyes, and said the one sentence she believed would end him. I found someone better. What she didn't know was that Ethan Caldwell had been waiting for her to say it. Manhattan at night had a way of disguising truth. From the outside, the Caldwell apartment, 43 floors above the city, looked like a glass box of perfection. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting. Soft jazz played in the background. The lighting was warm, intentional. Every detail curated, much like Vanessa herself. Ethan Caldwell stood by the window, his reflection faint against the city lights. In his hand, a glass of bourbon remained untouched. Behind him, Vanessa laughed softly at something on her phone. Not with him. Never with him anymore. "Who is it?" Ethan asked, his voice calm, almost too calm. Vanessa didn't look up. Just work. That word again. Work had become her shield, elastic enough to cover everything, vague enough to avoid questions. Ethan nodded slightly as if accepting it. But his eyes lingered not on her, but on the subtle details. The way her smile faded too quickly. The way she angled her screen away. The way her body leaned out of the marriage inch by inch. 3 months ago he would have asked more. Now he simply observed. Because Ethan Caldwell didn't chase answers anymore. He collected them. Vanessa stood up, smoothing her silk dress as she walked toward the kitchen. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," she said. "Big client. Might be out late again." "Of course," Ethan replied. "Always of course." She poured herself a glass of wine, her movements precise, practiced. She had always been good at performing, first for social media, then for clients, and now for him. "You should come with me to one of these events sometime," she added casually. "It might be good for you. Networking." Ethan turned slightly, watching her now. "I thought you preferred going alone." A flicker barely noticeable crossed her face. "I never said that." "No," he said quietly. "You didn't have to." Silence stretched between them, thin but sharp. Vanessa took a sip of wine, then smiled a controlled, measured expression. "You're reading too much into things again, Ethan. Again." The word landed heavier than she intended. Ethan didn't react. He had trained himself not to. Because reactions gave people power. And he had already decided he wouldn't give her any more. Instead, he walked past her, placing his glass down, untouched. "Get some rest," he said. "You'll need it." Vanessa watched him leave the room, her smile fading the moment his back turned. For a second, just a second, something like unease crept in, but she pushed it away, because in her mind she was already gone. Later that night, the apartment fell into a quiet so complete it almost felt staged. Vanessa lay in bed, her back turned toward Ethan. The glow of her phone illuminated the sheets. A message appeared. "Lucas, I miss you already." Her lips curved softer this time. Real. "Vanessa, you'll see me tomorrow." A pause, then another message. "Lucas, when are you going to tell him?" Vanessa hesitated. Her fingers hovered above the screen. She glanced over her shoulder. Ethan lay still, his breathing slow, even. Sleeping, or pretending to. She couldn't tell anymore. Vanessa soon. She locked her phone and placed it face down. For a moment she stared into the darkness. Then she whispered, barely audible, "I deserve better." Across the bed, Ethan's eyes opened. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. But in the darkness, something inside him settled into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. And unlike Vanessa, Ethan Caldwell didn't act on impulse. He built cases, carefully, patiently, and when the time came, he never lost. The first crack didn't sound like betrayal. It sounded like a timestamp. Ethan noticed it on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the night Vanessa would finally say the words out loud. He was standing in his office at Caldwell and Pierce, reviewing a contract when his phone lit up with a notification, a tagged photo. Vanessa, smiling flawless as always, stood in a rooftop bar in Soho, a glass of champagne in hand, city lights framing her like a carefully edited illusion. The caption beneath it read, "Late night strategy meeting with the best minds in media. #grind. Never stops. Ethan checked the time, 11:42 p.m. He remembered that night clearly, because at 10:15 p.m. Vanessa had texted him flight delayed, still at JFK, exhausted. Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was clean. A contradiction so simple, so careless. It felt like the first loose thread in a much larger fabric. And Ethan had always been very good at pulling threads. He didn't confront her that night, or the next, or the week after. Instead, he began to watch. Not like a jealous husband, but like an attorney preparing for trial. The apartment became quieter, not because they spoke less, but because Ethan listened more. Vanessa continued her routine, unaware of the shift. Early meetings, late dinners, last-minute client emergencies. Each excuse delivered with the same polished confidence that had built her career. And for the first time, Ethan began to document, not emotionally, systematically. He created a private folder on his encrypted drive. No dramatic labels, just a simple name, Caldwell versus Caldwell. Inside it, he stored everything. Screenshots of messages, time-stamped photos, calendar discrepancies, credit card statements that didn't align with her explanations. Every piece of information treated not as a wound, but as evidence. One evening, Vanessa walked in just after midnight, heels in hand, her hair slightly undone, in a way that looked too deliberate to be accidental. Long day, she sighed, dropping her bag onto the marble counter. Ethan sat at the dining table, a legal brief open in front of him. He didn't look up immediately. "Client dinner," he asked. "Yeah," she replied quickly. "New account. Huge potential." Ethan turned a page slowly. "Where Midtown? Some steakhouse." He nodded. "Which one?" A pause. Barely half a second. But Ethan heard it like a gavel striking wood. Delmonico's," she said too casually. Ethan finally looked up. Not sharply, not accusingly, just directly. "That's interesting," he said. Vanessa frowned slightly. They've been closed for private renovations this week." The air shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Vanessa blinked, then laughed a quick dismissive sound. "Then I must be thinking of somewhere else. It was loud, crowded. You know how those places blur together." Ethan held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "Of course." And just like that, the tension dissolved, at least on the surface. Later that night, while Vanessa showered, Ethan sat alone in the living room, his laptop open. He typed in silence. Date March. Claim client dinner at Delmonico's Midtown Fact Restaurant closed, verified via website and reservation system. Conclusion false statement. He paused, then added one more line. Pattern emerging. It wasn't just the lies, it was the evolution of them. At first, Vanessa had been careful, overly detailed, almost rehearsed. But as weeks passed, her stories became looser, more confident. She relied on his silence as validation, mistaking his restraint for ignorance. That was her first real mistake, because Ethan wasn't silent out of trust. He was silent out of strategy. The second crack came through something even smaller. Scent. Vanessa had always worn the same perfume, light floral, predictable. But one evening as she brushed past him, Ethan caught something different, deeper, warmer, masculine. He didn't react, didn't even turn his head. But later, when she left her coat draped over the chair, he picked it up carefully, bringing it closer, not like a suspicious husband, but like a forensic analyst. The scent was faint, but unmistakable, not hers. That night, he added another entry. Observation foreign cologne detected on outerwear. Inference. Clothes. Physical proximity with unidentified male. Status. Ongoing. Vanessa, meanwhile, felt something shifting but couldn't quite define it. It wasn't confrontation. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Absence. Ethan no longer asked where she was going, no longer questioned late nights, no longer reacted. At first it felt like freedom. Then it began to feel like distance. And distance, she realized, was harder to control. One Sunday morning, they sat across from each other at breakfast. Sunlight poured into the apartment, illuminating every polished surface, every carefully curated detail. Vanessa scrolled through her phone, occasionally smiling. Ethan sipped his coffee. "Lucas thinks I should expand into brand consulting," she said, suddenly the name slipping out before she could stop it. Silence. A single, irreversible second. Vanessa froze. Ethan placed his cup down slowly. "Lucas," he repeated. Her mind raced. "Client," she said quickly. "New client, tech startup." Ethan nodded once. "Of course." But something in his eyes changed. Not suspicion, not anger, recognition. That afternoon, Ethan sat in his office staring at the name on his screen. Lucas Grant, founder, CEO, rising figure in the tech world. Clean public image. Too clean. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. Then slowly he began a new file. Because this was no longer just about Vanessa. This was about the man she believed was better, and Ethan Caldwell had never lost a case once he knew who he was up against. Vanessa Caldwell had always believed she was in control of the narrative. That was, after all, her profession. She built brands, shaped perception, took fragmented truths and polished them into something irresistible. On social media, she wasn't just a woman, she was an aspiration, a life others envied, a marriage others admired, and now, a secret she justified. It started with small adjustments, then it became a second life. "Just 1 hour," she said, adjusting her reflection in the mirror of the private lounge at the Mercer Hotel. Her voice was soft, but there was urgency beneath it. Lucas Grant smiled, leaning casually against the bar, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest effortlessness. "You've been saying that for 3 months." Vanessa exhaled, glancing at her phone. No messages from Ethan, no missed calls, nothing. A flicker of something relief or maybe disappointment passed through her. "He doesn't notice," she said, almost to herself. Lucas stepped closer. "Or he doesn't care." The words landed deeper than she expected. Vanessa turned to face him fully, now her expression tightening. "That's not true." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure. Because Ethan had changed. Or maybe he had stopped pretending. He no longer asked about her day, no longer touched her absent-mindedly as he passed, no longer looked at her like she was the center of something. At first she told herself it was stress, work, the inevitable drift of long marriages. But over time a more convenient narrative took shape. He's distant, he's cold, he stopped trying. And somewhere along the line that narrative became permission. "You deserve someone who sees you," Lucas said, his voice lower now, closer. Vanessa met his gaze, and for a moment she let herself believe it. Back in Manhattan, Ethan sat alone in the apartment, the city humming quietly beyond the glass walls. His laptop screen glowed in the dim light. File, Lucas Grant. The information unfolded with clinical precision. Investment records, partnership structures, shell companies layered beneath legitimate ventures. Nothing illegal yet, but not clean, not transparent, not safe. Ethan scrolled slowly, his expression unreadable. Because this wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about risk. And Vanessa had no idea what she had stepped into. Meanwhile, Vanessa's double life became smoother, more practiced, more dangerous. She learned how to lie without hesitation. Late client dinner, weekend branding retreat, emergency strategy session. Each excuse delivered with the same confidence she used in boardrooms. And every time Ethan simply nodded, she felt justified. Because in her mind, silence meant acceptance. One evening she returned home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet. Ethan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, pouring himself a drink. He looked up as she entered. "You're home early." Vanessa smiled, setting her bag down. "Meeting got canceled." "Which one?" The question was casual, too casual. She hesitated just briefly. "The Westfield account." Ethan nodded slowly, taking a sip of his drink. "That's interesting." Vanessa felt it again, that subtle shift in the air. "What is," she asked, her tone light, but controlled. Ethan set the glass down. I had lunch with someone from Westfield this afternoon, he said. They mentioned your meeting was tomorrow. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Vanessa's mind raced. Oh, right, she said quickly. They moved it last minute. I forgot to tell you. Ethan held her gaze, long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then, of course, again, always that word. Later that night, Vanessa stood alone in the bathroom staring at her reflection. Something wasn't right. It wasn't that Ethan knew, it was that he might. And that uncertainty was harder to control than any confrontation. She grabbed her phone. Vanessa, we need to be more careful. Lucas replied almost instantly. Lucas, relax. You're overthinking. She stared at the screen, then typed, he's not asking questions anymore. There was a pause this time, longer. Then, Lucas, then you've already won. But Vanessa didn't feel like she had won. Not completely, because somewhere deep down, she sensed something she couldn't quite define. Ethan wasn't passive, he wasn't oblivious, he was waiting. Across the apartment, Ethan sat in the dark, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. On his screen, a new entry appeared. Subject Vanessa Caldwell, status escalation confirmed, behavioral shift, increased confidence, reduced caution, risk level high. He paused, then added one final line. Subject believes she is in control. Ethan closed the laptop slowly. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a single quiet breath. Not of relief, but of certainty. Because the more Vanessa leaned into her double life, the less careful she became. And the less careful she became, the easier it would be to end it. At exactly 11 p.m., Vanessa Caldwell decided to end her marriage. Not because she had to, but because she believed she could. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with late-night energy, distant sirens, flickering headlights, the low hum of a city that never truly slept. But inside, everything felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed in anticipation. Vanessa stood near the window, her silhouette reflected faintly in the glass. She had just returned, heels in hand, hair slightly undone, lips, still carrying the faintest trace of a smile that didn't belong to this home. Ethan sat on the couch, a book open in his hands, unread. He didn't look up immediately. He didn't need to. I think we should talk, Vanessa said. Her tone was calm, practiced. Ethan turned a page slowly before closing the book. About what, he asked, his voice even. Vanessa crossed her arms, not defensively, but deliberately. She had rehearsed this moment, played it out in her mind more than once. In every version, she was the one in control. I've been thinking a lot lately, she began, about us, about what we are and what we're not. Ethan leaned back slightly, his eyes finally meeting hers. There was no tension in his expression, no confusion, just attention, and somehow that unsettled her. This isn't working anymore, she continued. We both know it. Ethan said nothing. Vanessa took a breath, then delivered the line she believed would define everything that came next. I found someone better. Silence. Complete. Absolute. The kind of silence that usually comes before something breaks. Vanessa waited. For anger, for disbelief, for the sharp edge of wounded pride. But none of it came. Instead, Ethan exhaled softly and nodded. I know. The world didn't shatter. It tilted. Subtly. But enough to make Vanessa's breath catch. What she said, the words slipping out before she could stop it. Ethan stood up slowly, setting the book aside with deliberate care. Every movement measured, controlled. I know, he repeated. Vanessa laughed, a quick, disbelieving sound. That's not possible. Ethan walked past her, heading toward his desk. Lucas Grant, he said almost casually. Founder. CEO. Currently overvalued by about 40% if you ask the right analysts. Vanessa's stomach dropped. You're bluffing. Ethan opened his laptop. No. The screen turned toward her. A series of images. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Vanessa entering a hotel, Lucas following minutes later. Receipts, locations, dates, patterns. Her pulse spiked. This doesn't mean anything, she said quickly. We've met for work. That's not. Ethan clicked again. A different image. Closer. More intimate. Her hand in Lucas's. Her head tilted toward his shoulder. No ambiguity left to hide behind. Vanessa felt the ground beneath her shift completely now. You've been spying on me, she snapped, her voice rising. That's insane, Ethan. That's controlling. That's accurate, he interrupted. The word landed clean. Sharp. Vanessa stared at him, her chest rising and falling faster now. You don't get to turn this around on me, she said, grasping for control. Maybe if you had actually been present, if you had paid attention, none of this would have happened. There it was. Blame. Familiar. Predictable. Ethan watched her not with anger, but with something far more unsettling. Clarity. I was present, he said quietly. You just stopped looking. Vanessa shook her head, pacing now. No. You checked out first. You stopped trying Ethan. You stopped caring. I felt invisible in this marriage. And your solution, he replied, was to disappear from it completely. She stopped. Silence again, but this time it pressed in from all sides. I deserve more, she said finally, her voice lower now, but still defiant. Ethan nodded once. I agree. The words hit her harder than any accusation. What you deserve, exactly what you chose, he said. Vanessa's composure began to fracture. Not all at once, but in small visible cracks. You think you're so calm, she said, her voice tightening, like you're above all this. But you're not. You're just too afraid to feel anything. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked back toward the couch, sitting down with the same controlled precision as before. I felt everything he said, just not in front of you. Vanessa's throat tightened. For the first time that night, she wasn't leading the conversation anymore. How long, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan met her gaze. Long enough. Her mind raced back every lie, every excuse, every moment she thought she was getting away with it. All of it. Seen, recorded, understood. You were just watching, she said, disbelief creeping in. Learning, he corrected. Vanessa sank into the chair across from him, her body suddenly heavy. This is insane, she murmured. You could have said something. You could have stopped this. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Why would I stop you from showing me who you really are? The question had no easy answer, because there wasn't one. The room felt colder now, sharper, every illusion stripped away. You think you've won? Vanessa asked, a final attempt at reclaiming ground. Ethan didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply looked at her. No, he said. This isn't the part where I win. A pause. Then, this is the part where you realize what you've already lost. Vanessa's breath caught. Because for the first time since she walked into that apartment, she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't a breakup. It wasn't even a confrontation. It was a conclusion. And she hadn't been the one writing it. Ethan reached for his glass, finally taking a sip. Calm, unshaken. I'll be filing for divorce, he said. You'll receive the paperwork in the morning. Vanessa stared at him, speechless, frozen. Exactly as she had imagined him, but reversed. You can't just, she started. I can, he said simply, and the certainty in his voice made it clear he already had. The clock on the wall ticked softly. 11:17 p.m. 17 minutes. That was all it took. For a marriage to end. Vanessa sat there, unmoving. Because for the first time since she said those words, I found someone better, she realized something far more terrifying. Ethan hadn't reacted. Because he had already moved on. Not to someone else, but beyond her. And there was no place in that future for her to return to. Vanessa Caldwell had built her entire life on one fundamental belief. If you controlled the story, you controlled reality. And she was not ready to lose control. You're overreacting. The words came fast, instinctive. a reflex sharpened by years of navigating crises, reshaping narratives, and turning doubt into persuasion. Vanessa stood now no longer frozen but mobilized. Her posture straightened, her voice steadied. The panic that had briefly cracked through her composure began to retreat behind something more familiar. Strategy. This, she gestured toward the laptop, this doesn't prove anything. You're taking fragments and turning them into something they're not. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply watched. And that more than anything unsettled her. You've always done this, Vanessa continued, her tone gaining strength. You assume the worst. You analyze everything like it's a case to win instead of a relationship to understand. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Go on. She blinked. That wasn't resistance. It was invitation. And she took it. You stopped being a husband a long time ago, she said. You became distant cold, like I was just another file on your desk. Do you even remember the last time you actually asked how I felt? Ethan's gaze didn't waver. I do. A beat. You said you were fine. The words landed with quiet precision. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Because you never created space for anything else. Ethan nodded slowly as if considering the argument. Interesting, he said. So your position is emotional neglect justified infidelity. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, he replied calmly. Vanessa exhaled sharply, turning away, running a hand through her hair. He wasn't reacting the way she expected. No anger, no raised voice, just structure. Like every word she spoke was being filed, categorized, and prepared for dismantling. You're twisting this, she said, softer now, but more dangerous. You always twist things to make yourself look right. Ethan stood, not abruptly, but with intention. I don't need to twist anything, he said. I just need to ask the right questions. Vanessa turned back to face him, then ask. Silence. Then, March 12th, Ethan said. You told me you were at JFK, flight delayed. Vanessa's chest tightened, but her face remained composed. Yes, you posted a photo from Soho at 11:42 p.m. A flicker. That was after. I made it back into the city. Ethan nodded. Flight records show your plane landed at 1:08 a.m. The air shifted. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, adjusted. I must be mixing up the dates. Ethan took a step closer. March 12th, he repeated. The date is not flexible. She pivoted. Quickly. Fine. Maybe I got the timing wrong. That doesn't mean anything happened. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he walked past her, picking up his phone. Another tap, another piece of evidence. March 18th, he said. Client, dinner, Delmonico's. Vanessa's pulse quickened. I already told you they were closed, he interrupted. You corrected yourself, said you mixed up the restaurant. Yes. Ethan turned the phone toward her. A reservation confirmation. The Mercer Hotel, private dining room, 2 guests. Her name, Lucas's name, time-stamped, undeniable. Vanessa's composure cracked again, but this time it didn't recover as easily. That she started, her voice faltering. That was business. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Private dining room, 2 guests, under both your names. She swallowed. We were discussing a partnership. At 10:30 p.m., that's when he was available. Ethan held her gaze, unblinking. And the hotel suite afterward, he asked quietly. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Vanessa felt it now, the walls closing in the space, her maneuver shrinking with every second, but she wasn't done. She couldn't be. You followed me, she said suddenly, her voice rising again. You tracked me, collected all of this like some kind of obsession. That's not normal, Ethan. That's not healthy. There it was. Deflection, reversal. Make him the problem. Ethan listened, then nodded. You're right. The agreement caught her off guard. What it's not normal, he said. But neither is systematically lying to your spouse for months. Vanessa's breath hitched. You drove me to it, she snapped. You created an environment where I felt alone, where I needed something else. Ethan's expression didn't change. Needed he repeated, or wanted? The distinction cut deeper than accusation. Vanessa's voice dropped. I wanted to feel alive again. Finally honesty, but it came too late. Ethan stepped closer now, closing the distance between them. Then, let's be honest, he said. You didn't find someone better. A pause. You found someone easier. The words landed like impact. Because somewhere beneath the denial, Vanessa knew they were true. You don't get to judge me, she said, but the conviction was fading now. You're not perfect. You're distant. You're cold. You stopped being someone I could connect with. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe. A beat. But I didn't lie. Silence again. But this time it was different. Because Vanessa was running out of moves. Ethan walked back to the table, closing the laptop with quiet finality. I gave you multiple opportunities to tell the truth, he said. Indirectly, subtly, you chose not to take them. Vanessa's voice trembled now. I was going to tell you. When he asked, she didn't answer, because there was no answer that wouldn't collapse under its own weight. Ethan looked at her one last time, not with anger. Not with pain, but with something far more definitive. Conclusion. You didn't confess tonight because you felt guilty, he said. You confessed because you thought you had an upgrade. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. And you were wrong. The words echoed in the silence that followed. Sharp. Irreversible. Vanessa sank back into the chair, her body no longer holding the same certainty it had just minutes ago. The narrative she had built, the version of events where she was justified, empowered, in control, was unraveling, piece by piece, and Ethan hadn't raised his voice once. That was the part that terrified her most. Because this wasn't a fight, it was a dismantling. And for the first time since it began, Vanessa realized she wasn't losing an argument. She was losing everything. The silence after the collapse of Vanessa's arguments didn't feel empty. It felt occupied by something heavier, something deliberate. Vanessa sat motionless, her hands resting in her lap, fingers loosely intertwined as if holding herself together by habit alone. The sharp confidence that once defined her had dulled, replaced by something far more fragile. Across from her, Ethan stood near the window again, the city lights reflected in his eyes, not chaotic, not restless. Still, controlled. You planned this, Vanessa said finally, her voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier edge. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was realization. Ethan didn't turn immediately. Yes. No hesitation, no denial. Vanessa let out a breath that felt heavier than anything she had carried before. For how long? Ethan glanced at his watch as if calculating. Long enough to ensure there were no variables left. The words settled slowly like dust after a collapse. No variables, she repeated. You built your life on perception, Ethan continued, now turning to face her. I built mine on outcomes. Vanessa shook her head faintly. So what? This is some kind of strategy to punish me? Ethan stepped closer, his expression calm, but now there was something else beneath it. Precision. No, he said. This is what happens when someone mistakes patience for weakness. Vanessa felt a chill run through her, not from fear, but from clarity, because she was starting to understand something she hadn't before. Ethan hadn't been reacting to her choices. He had been preparing for them. What else do you know? She asked. Her voice was steady, but only just. Ethan studied her for a moment, then walked back to the table, reopening his laptop. You want the truth, he said. Vanessa swallowed. Yes. Ethan turned the screen toward her, but this time it wasn't about her. Lucas Grant, a name she had come to associate with excitement, escape, possibility. Now it looked different. Your someone better, Ethan said quietly, is currently under informal review by 2 regulatory bodies. Vanessa frowned, confusion cutting through the tension. What are you talking about? Ethan clicked. Documents appeared, emails, financial breakdowns, partnership structures that looped through multiple shell companies. Lucas's startup isn't as clean as it looks, Ethan explained. Inflated valuations, questionable investor disclosures, funds routed through intermediaries that don't hold up under scrutiny. Vanessa stared at the screen, her brow tightening. No, she said quickly. That's not. He told me everything was transparent, Ethan finished. She looked at him sharply. He wouldn't lie about that. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, watching her process. You said the same thing about yourself, he said. The words hit harder than anything else he had said that night, because this time they didn't feel like an attack. They felt like a mirror. Vanessa looked back at the screen, at the data, at the cracks forming in the image she had chosen to believe. This doesn't prove anything illegal, she said, though her voice had lost its certainty. Not yet, Ethan agreed, but it doesn't need to. A pause. In your world, perception is everything, isn't it? Vanessa didn't answer, because she knew. What are you going to do? She asked slowly. Ethan closed the laptop again. The sound felt final. I've already done it. Her head snapped up. What does that mean? Ethan walked toward the bar, pouring himself another drink, finally finishing what he had started earlier. It was a small detail, but deliberate. I've scheduled a presentation, he said, tomorrow night. Vanessa's pulse quickened. A presentation, where Ethan took a sip before answering. Media Tech Summit, the one you were supposed to attend with Lucas. The room seemed to shrink. You can't be serious. I am. Vanessa stood abruptly now, the chair scraping softly against the floor. That's a high-profile event, she said. Investors, executives, press, do you have any idea what you're talking about? Ethan met her gaze. Exactly. The realization hit her all at once, not in fragments, not in stages, all at once. You're going to expose him, she said. And you, Ethan added calmly. Vanessa took a step back. No, she said, shaking her head. No, you can't do that. This isn't just about us anymore. That would destroy everything. Ethan didn't move. That's the point. Her breath became uneven. This will ruin me, she said, her voice breaking for the first time. My career, my reputation, everything I've built. Ethan's expression didn't soften. You already made that decision, he said. I didn't know she started. You didn't ask, he corrected. Silence. But now it wasn't heavy. It was suffocating. Vanessa stepped closer, her composure fracturing completely now. Ethan, please, she said, the word unfamiliar on her lips. We can handle this privately. There's no need to make it public. We can figure something out. There it was. Not manipulation, not control, desperation. Ethan studied her for a long moment, as if measuring something, then no. The finality in that single word left no room for negotiation. You don't understand, Vanessa said, her voice trembling. This will follow me forever. I won't recover from this. Ethan nodded once. I know. The simplicity of his response broke something in her, because there was no cruelty in it, no anger, just truth. Vanessa sank back again, her body no longer able to hold itself upright with the same strength. You've already decided everything, she whispered. Ethan didn't deny it. Yes. A long pause stretched between them. Then Vanessa asked the question she had been avoiding. Why wait? Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, because timing, he said, is the difference between reaction and impact. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, and in that moment she finally understood the full extent of what she was facing. This wasn't a man reacting to betrayal. This was a man who had turned betrayal into leverage. When she opened her eyes again, Ethan was already walking away. Get some rest, he said without turning back. You'll need it. The same words he had said before, but now they meant something entirely different. Vanessa sat alone in the silence that followed her mind, racing through every possible outcome, every scenario, every consequence. And for the first time since this began, she wasn't thinking about control, or justification, or even Lucas. She was thinking about survival. Across the apartment, Ethan closed the door behind him. And for the first time that night, he allowed himself to feel something. Not anger, not pain, but resolution. 0-0. Because tomorrow night, everything would end. The ballroom at the Manhattan Grand Hotel shimmered with curated perfection. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over a sea of tailored suits and designer gowns. Conversations flowed effortlessly, measured laughter, strategic introductions, calculated charm. This was where reputations were built, deals were made, and influence quietly shifted hands. And tonight it would all collapse. Vanessa stood near the entrance, her posture flawless, her expression composed to the point of artifice. Every detail of her appearance was intentional: the dress, the heels, the controlled smile. From a distance, she looked exactly like the woman she had always presented to the world. Up close there were cracks, barely visible, but there. "Hey, Lucas," said, stepping beside her, his presence confident, reassuring. He leaned in slightly, his voice low. "You look incredible." Vanessa forced a smile. "So do you," but her eyes moved subtly, constantly scanning the room. "Looking for someone." "Relax," Lucas murmured, noticing. "This is our night. Our night." The words felt wrong now. Heavy, uncertain. "Where's Ethan?" Lucas asked casually. Vanessa's breath caught for a fraction of a second. "He's not coming," she said quickly. "Why would he?" Lucas shrugged. "Just asking." But something in his tone, something too neutral, sent a flicker of unease through her. Because deep down, she wasn't sure anymore what Ethan would do. Across the room, conversations began to shift. Subtle at first, then more noticeable. Eyes turning, whispers forming, a ripple moving through the crowd like a quiet current. Vanessa felt it before she understood it. And then she saw him. Ethan Caldwell didn't enter the room like a man seeking attention. He entered like a man who already had it. No announcement, no hesitation, just presence. His suit was simple, precise. His expression unreadable. But his eyes were fixed. On her. Vanessa's pulse spiked instantly. "What is he doing here?" she whispered, more to herself than to Lucas. Lucas followed her gaze. For the first time since she had known him, his confidence flickered. "Did you tell him about this event?" he asked. "No." The answer came too quickly, too sharp. Ethan moved through the room with quiet certainty, exchanging brief nods with familiar faces. People noticed him not just because of who he was, but because of how he carried himself. Controlled, unshaken, purposeful. And then he stopped, right at the center of the room. The host, mid-conversation, turned toward him with polite surprise. "Ethan, I didn't know you'd be joining us tonight." Ethan offered a small, composed smile. Last-minute decision. Vanessa felt her throat tighten. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't curiosity. This was execution. Moments later, the lights dimmed slightly. The soft hum of conversation faded as attention shifted toward the stage. The scheduled presentation was about to begin. Lucas straightened beside her. "We're up soon," he said quietly. But his voice didn't carry the same confidence as before. Vanessa didn't respond. Because something deep inside her, something instinctive, was telling her that nothing about this night was going to go as planned. The host stepped onto the stage, introducing the next segment. "And now we have a special presentation, one that I believe will offer a unique perspective on transparency and integrity in today's market." A pause, a glance toward the side of the stage, and presenting Ethan Caldwell. The world stopped. Vanessa's vision narrowed. The sound in the room dulled as if submerged underwater. "No," she whispered. Lucas turned sharply toward her. "What is this?" But Vanessa didn't answer, because she already knew. Ethan stepped onto the stage with calm precision. No notes, no hesitation, just presence. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady, carrying effortlessly through the room. "I wasn't originally scheduled to speak tonight, but sometimes timing creates its own necessity." A few polite chuckles, curiosity, interest. Vanessa felt her hands begin to tremble. "I'd like to talk about two things," Ethan continued. "Perception and reality." The screen behind him flickered to life. A clean, professional slide appeared. Lucas Grant, Business Structure Overview. Lucas stiffened beside her. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Ethan didn't look at them. He didn't need to. "What you see publicly," he said, gesturing toward the screen, "is a rapidly growing company with strong investor confidence." The next slide appeared. Complex diagrams, financial flows, connections that weren't meant to be seen. And what you don't see is how that image is constructed. Murmurs spread through the room, low, uneasy. Lucas stepped forward slightly. "This is inappropriate," he said under his breath. "He can't do this." Vanessa's voice came out barely audible. "He already is." Ethan clicked again. Emails, documents, evidence layered with surgical precision. "Inflated valuations," he said. "Non-disclosed partnerships. Funds routed through intermediary entities designed to obscure origin and intent." The room shifted, no longer curious, now alert. Lucas moved toward the stage. "This is misleading," he called out louder now. "You're taking things out of context." Ethan turned his head slightly, for the first time acknowledging him. "Then by all means," Ethan said calmly, "clarify the context." Silence. Because Lucas couldn't. Not here. Not like this. Vanessa felt the ground beneath her disappear completely. This wasn't just exposure, this was dismantling. And then Ethan clicked one final time. The screen changed. A photo. Clear. Undeniable. Vanessa. Lucas. Together. The room went still. Not quiet, still. Of course, Ethan said, his voice unchanged. Perception isn't limited to business. He paused, letting the image speak. Vanessa couldn't breathe. Sometimes, he continued, it extends into personal integrity as well. The whispers came back, louder now, sharper. Vanessa felt every eye in the room shift toward her. Judgment, shock, recognition. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." Lucas stepped back, his expression no longer controlled. "What the hell have you done?" he hissed at her. But Vanessa couldn't answer, because for the first time she wasn't thinking about him. She was looking at Ethan, standing alone on that stage, calm, unshaken, untouchable. And in that moment she understood something with devastating clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was a verdict. Ethan let the silence stretch just long enough. Then, "Thank you," he said simply. No dramatic exit, no raised voice, no anger, just truth. And as he stepped off the stage, everything Vanessa had built began to collapse in real time. Phones came out, messages were sent. Conversation shifted instantly from admiration to speculation to judgment. Lucas was already pulling away, distancing, calculating. Vanessa stood alone in the center of a room that had once admired her and now was watching her fall. The silence didn't come all at once. It unraveled. At first the ballroom was filled with noise, whispers, hurried conversations, the soft glow of phones capturing fragments of scandal in real time. But as the weight of what had just happened settled in, something shifted. People didn't just talk. They distanced. Vanessa felt it in the space around her, where once there had been warmth, admiration, curiosity, there was now absence. A subtle, deliberate clearing, as if she had become something contagious. Vanessa. The voice came from behind her, familiar, but no longer reassuring. She turned. Lucas. But he wasn't looking at her the same way. There was no charm now, no warmth, only calculation. "You didn't tell me he had this," Lucas said, his voice low, controlled. Vanessa stared at him, her throat tightening. I didn't know." "You didn't know," he cut in sharper now. "He just walked into a room full of investors and tore apart my company, and you didn't think to mention that he might be capable of that." His words hit hard, but not because they were cruel, because they were accurate. "I thought I had control," she whispered. Lucas let out a short, humorless breath. "Control," he repeated. "You just destroyed both of us." The finality in his tone landed like a door slamming shut. Vanessa took a step toward him. "Lucas, we can fix this. We just need to..." No, he said immediately. Not hesitation, not doubt, just refusal. He stepped back, creating distance. I need to contain this, he added. From a business standpoint. Vanessa's chest tightened. Contain Lucas, this isn't just business, it is now. The words stripped everything else away. Vanessa stood there watching as he turned, walked away, didn't look back. And just like that, and just like the man she had chosen over her marriage, chose himself over her. The room felt colder, larger, empty in a way that had nothing to do with space. Vanessa's vision blurred slightly as she turned, scanning the crowd again, looking for one person, only one. Ethan. She found him near the exit, not surrounded, not engaged, just leaving. Of course he was. Ethan. Her voice broke as she called out, cutting through the thinning noise of the room. Heads turned again, but this time, not with curiosity, with recognition. Ethan stopped, slowly, then turned. Vanessa moved toward him quickly, her heels clicking unevenly against the polished floor, her composure unraveling with every step. Ethan, wait, please. She reached him, her breath uneven now, her eyes searching his face for something, anything, regret, anger, emotion. But what she found was distance. You can't just walk away like this, she said, her voice trembling, not after everything. Ethan studied her for a moment, not coldly, not cruelly, just clearly. I already did, he said. The simplicity of it broke something inside her. I made a mistake, she said quickly, the words rushing now. Okay, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can start over. We can rebuild. Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her fill the silence with desperation. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she continued, her voice cracking. I thought I needed something else, but I was wrong. I see that now. I see everything now. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. Please, she whispered, don't do this. Ethan's gaze softened, but only slightly, and not in the way she hoped. When did you realize that? He asked quietly. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. When did you realize it was a mistake? He repeated. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. After tonight, he added. The truth hovered between them, unavoidable. Vanessa's voice dropped. But she couldn't finish, because anything she said would only confirm it. Ethan nodded once. That's what I thought. Her breath caught. No, that's not fair. It's accurate, he said. The word hit her like impact, because she had used that same defense, that same tone, and now there was nowhere left to hide from it. I chose you, she said suddenly, her voice rising with urgency. For years, Ethan, I stayed. I built a life with you. Doesn't that count for something? Ethan held her gaze. It did, he said. A pause. Until it didn't. The finality in his voice left no room for interpretation. Vanessa shook her head, tears falling freely now. You're just going to throw everything away just like that? Ethan exhaled slowly. No, he said. You did that. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. Vanessa's shoulders began to shake. Not dramatically, not performatively, but with the quiet, uncontrollable collapse of someone who had finally run out of defenses. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words were real this time, stripped of strategy, stripped of control. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time that night, and for a brief moment there was something there, a flicker, not of love, but of memory. Then it was gone. I know, he said. Vanessa's breath hitched. Hope, fragile, desperate, rose for just a second. But Ethan stepped back, and that was when she understood. I don't forgive you, he added. The words didn't come with anger, or cruelty, or even satisfaction, just truth. Vanessa felt something inside her collapse completely. Not crack, not weaken. Collapse. Ethan? She said, her voice barely audible now, but he was already turning away. This is where it ends, he said without looking back. And then he walked. No hesitation, no pause, no second glance. The doors closed behind him with a quiet finality that echoed louder than anything else that night. Vanessa stood there alone in the aftermath. No Lucas, no Ethan, no image left to protect. Only consequence. Around her, the room continued to shift. Phones buzzed. Voices murmured. Reputations recalculated in real time. And in the center of it all, Vanessa Caldwell finally understood the full cost of what she had done. Not just the marriage, not just the affair, but the illusion she had built her life on. Gone. Irretrievable. Outside, the city moved on as it always did, unforgiving, unchanged. And somewhere within it, Ethan Caldwell walked forward, not as a man who had lost something, but as a man who had finally chosen himself.